Sorry about that. I wanted to start going live on YouTube because a lot of people are going to join in from YouTube. So everyone who didn't join, who just started the YouTube live, we are starting with a live poll. Is there a feedback?
Just a tad bit feedback.
I think maybe if you have your YouTube volume up, you might need to mute that as well.
Thank you. Yep, that's what it was. Anyway, so we will start with a quick poll. What you have to do is get out of Zoom. You don't have to log out of it. Just go on your browser and go to slido.com, and then it's going to ask you for an event ID, and that is IEC. The event ID is going to be IEC. You can do that.
There's a feedback. Jabbar had you.
Is it showing now?
Sorry, what is the code?
The code is IEC. It should show up on.
Can you put the information on the chat, please?
Sure. I'm trying to screen share, so it should show on the screen. How do I do screen share? Can you guys see it on the screen? Slido.com.
Yes, I see it on the screen, sister.
You see it? Okay, so I will start the poll now. And the question for the poll is, have you ever witnessed an instance of racial bias in the Muslim community against a Black community member? Many times, yes, but rarely, can't recall, or no, it doesn't exist in our community. And again, to reiterate, the answers are completely anonymous. You will not be able to see who said what here. So people can continue answering, and I would at this time invite Brother Ustad Ibrahim Abdul Jabbar. He's our first guest. We have 4 panelists tonight, and the first guest is Ustad Ibrahim Abdul Jabbar. He has a certificate from Harvard University in Islamic Studies, Islam through its scriptures. He undertook private hawza and online classes under several scholars, and he's one of the founding members of Muslim Community Center for Thaqalain in Maryland. He has an extensive bio, and inshallah, I will post the full bio in the Zoom chat. But first, let's all welcome Ustad with a loud salawat.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad.
Alhamdulillah, to first start by asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bring us closer to him through the beloved name of our beloved Prophet, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. And I would like to start with Thumma salatu wa salamu ala Sayyidina wa Maulana Ashraf al-Anbiya al-Mursaleen Habibi Ilahi al-Alameen al-Bashir al-Nadir wa Siraj al-Munir al-Mansur al-Muayyid wa Mahmud al-Ahmad Abul Qasim Mustafa, the chosen one, Muhammad, salawatullah, Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad, wa ala ali ahli bayt at-tayyibin at-tahirin wal ma'asumin. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Inna Allah wa malaikatahu yusalluna ala nabi. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu sallu alayhi wa sallimu taslima. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. I would like to first and foremost thank everyone for inviting us to this panel, all of those who organized this, the blessed community at the IEC. And I would like to greet you with the greeting that we say every day when we make our salatu namaz. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. My name is Brother Ibrahim Abdul Jabbar. I'm currently the Community Outreach Coordinator for the Muslim Community Center for Thakalain in Bowie, Maryland. I also attend the IEC here in Orlando, Florida, and I am your brother. Before we start, to gain a little perspective about what's currently going on in society, what has brought us here today to talk about this topic, I have written a poem, and inshallah, everyone can hear me well. So to gain that perspective, I'm going to recite this poem. They kidnapped my ancestors, forced them into chattel slavery, brought us to foreign lands, and treated us like animals by putting chains on our necks. They gathered rope, then gathered in crowds and clapped and cheered the murderers on while hanging us from trees, from nooses like strange fruits by our necks. They beat Emmett Till for a crime he did not commit with no mercy until they disfigured him. They beat him to death. They chained us to trees, beat our ancestors with whips, and left scars on our flesh. They arrived in my motherland, kidnapped Hafiz of the Holy Quran, put them in chains. My DNA traces back to their steps. They murdered the ones who fought for our freedom with immunity. Huey P. Newton, Dr. Martin Luther King, young Malcolm Latif Shabazz, Shaheed Al-Hajj Malik Shabazz, the one known as Malcolm X. Fast forward to the future now. Now we live in a time where in New York City, 2020, during Shahr Ramadan, while the coronavirus swept, they threw a black man on the ground and put another knee on his neck. The officer was never charged or fired, but given duty at his desk. They followed Ahmaud Arbery, chased him down, and recorded it for all to see. He fought his murderers like a warrior. As they shot him, he died. He had no strength left. Our village elders, women and youth, wonder and ask their beloved families, am I next? They have killed us on camera for years. The limits of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have been transgressed. We attend our masjids just to get away as a safe haven with all of this on our mind. When and if you do return our salams and our eyes, you can see the stress. And now for the whole world to see, people pulled out their mobile devices and the red record button they pressed. A black man falsely accused of a crime while 4 officers hold him down as he called for his mama, who died years ago on the same day. For the next 9 minutes of his life, he echoed the same words of Eric Garner, I can't breathe, as we watched him take his last breath. To the tribes that have been often marginalized and voiceless, going through pain throughout this world, don't worry. There is no barrier between the du'as of the oppressed. Allahumma ameen. God bless. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow you to hear me today. And while I'm giving this short presentation, maybe we can unpack what I just said in the poem and you can go back later and listen to it to understand. I don't want you to hear me today just to hear me and walk off as a, this is just a conversation we had and we're over it. We want you to understand us and we want to understand you. The application of Islam and the studying Islam or growing up as a Muslim are 2 totally different things. When we come to the masjid, many times we see a place that we know that we want to come to, that's where brotherhood and sisterhood and fellowship exists. We have to make sure that when you go to the masjid and you see everyone pious. Everyone is assalamu alaikum, returning salams to each other. Everyone is in the masjid praying, making dua. This is a place, this is finally a place that we can go to and our minds can be free of everything that is going on in the corrupted world. So when that place, and not particularly any specific place I'm speaking about, any masajid throughout the country, whenever you experience something like racism, as it has been said and told to us, when we go to these places and we're looking for light, we have to remember that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran that He brings you from darkness into light, from dhulimat to nur. But when you go to a place that you're looking at as your home, a place that you're looking at for a safe haven, for peace, for serenity, and someone has a bad experience, then the experience reverses. You go from light to dhulimat. There's recently a lecture that was a lecture series that I was involved with, the coordination of it, and it had something in it. It had a title in it that I wanted to share with you all tonight, and it says, "Our faith brings us together, but our akhlaq keeps us together." So we have to go to the akhlaq of Ahlul Bayt alayhim wasalam and see how did they treat those individuals that were around them, who were dark, who were black. Many times we see in the history of Ahlul Bayt alayhim wasalam, there's so many stories. Look at the story of John bin Huway, who was a companion of the Ahlul Bayt. But many times when we hear this story from the member or any other place or any person from the community, they say, "Oh, John the slave." There were many people who were companions of the Ahlul Bayt alayhim wasalam who were also slaves. But this is never mentioned through my limited studies of Islam. Our beloved Jafar, no, I'm sorry, stuff, our beloved Salman al-Farisi, which is, mentioned to call him Salman Muhammad, Salman Ahlul Bayt, was also a slave at one point. I believe my dad also was a slave at one point. So, when we are talking about Black people in history of Islam and inclusion and diversity, the first thing that we hear a lot of times from people in the masjid is, "Oh, but look at Bilal, he was a slave, and look what happened with him." So slavery has a negative connotation when it comes to our people because of what we went through. Instead of saying that Bilal was a mu'min, Bilal was a good companion of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the first thing that comes out of people's mouth is he was a slave, he was a servant, and he echoed the adhan, and he was the mu'adhin of the adhan. The mu'adhin of the adhan is absolutely an honorable title, but there's many people in Islamic history who are, people that we can draw inspiration from. One of those people are who? Sumayya bint al-Khayyat. Sumayya bint al-Khayyat was a person that was the first martyr. Some people say, some historian books of Sirah say that she was the first martyr of Islam. But when you look at movies like The Message, and not blaming any masajid for this, but Hollywood, you look at movies like The Message, this is an individual that they casted as a white individual. So when we read the stories and say that Sumayya bint al-Khayyat was the mother of Ammar ibn Yasir, and they called Ammar ibn Yasir, "O son of Sauda," "O son of the black woman," then we look and we get confused. Why is it that we see a different image than we read in the book? The pictures of the holy imams, is something that also is a topic that's came up, quite frequently, many times in conversations. When we see the imams, we hear stories about the imams coming from Africa, their mothers being from Africa. But we see pictures of the imams, and it's all pictures of everyone look like they're from one particular country. These are questions that we have to ask ourselves. But going back to akhlaq, when we come into our masjids and we see people, and people are, eager to give you salams, people are eager to, talk to you about life, get your perspective about Islam, and someone treats them bad. Maybe some people say, well, that's not a racial issue. That's a human being issue. That's an akhlaq issue. But we have to correct this akhlaq, because when someone does that and it continuously goes on with one set of individuals, black people in America, then we start to think to ourselves, wow, is this just for our group? So we have to ask ourselves that question. Please let me know when my time is up, sister, because I got quite a few notes and I just wanted to make sure I was prepared. Another thing is true brotherhood is pure. If we are being really brothers to each other, then when you see a black individual and you think about the stories of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, I recently asked one of the members of my community back home, how would you like to see our community, our current community? And this individual said, I would like to see the community go back to the days of Rasulullah, where people visited the houses, where we sat with each other like families. Foreign community could sit with the immigrant community. I'm sorry, the immigrant community could sit with the African American community. How many people by poll, not this is like a personal poll, not the one that you're doing, sister, but this is like a personal thing that we have to ask ourselves at night when we're doing muhasaba or we're doing muraqat. How many people that you see that's in the African American community that may have been coming to our respective masjids for years, and this is for the whole community. How many of them have you invited into your home for a meal? How many of them have invited you into your home, to their home for a meal, to talk and discuss and dialogue about the current things that's happening in society? We have to keep that in mind. There's a quick story about some racism that went on at the time of the Holy Imam Rida alayhi salam. And he was making, it said in the books of history that he was making wudu, or he was, watering some parts of his body and washing his hands and everything. And they were in this place as like a watering house. And because Imam Rida alayhi salam, in this particular story that was taught by the Sayyid, he was told by a person that was there because he was dark. And some narrations say that he was very dark, right? That one of these individuals said to him, they said, take that water and pour it on my feet. But some of the individuals in this waterhouse knew who Imam Rida alayhi salam was. And they said to him, how dare you? How dare you ask the son of the prophet, the grandson of the holy prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, to do something like this? But this was the order of society, way of society, right? So we have to make sure that we understand that these things even happen to our holy imams, and we have to make sure that they don't happen in our centers. And another thing that I want to always make sure that we're tackling the issue. But in another breath, I want to say to everyone that when we come to a place, a center, come with the mind frame of purity. Haram is haram. A violation on a Muslim's rights is a violation. But there's a quick story. There was a man really quickly. He came to a masjid one time, and when he came to this masjid, the people in the masjid were different things. The kids were running around. Someone was over in the corner reading Quran. Someone didn't salam him. Another person did this, and another person did that. After salat, it was a lecture. The man said to the elder individual as he was leaving, the elder said to him, are you leaving? He said, yes, I'm leaving. He said, I'll never come back to this masjid again. He said, why? And he listed all of the things that were going on at the masjid that he didn't like. The elder asked him and said to him, he said, look, I want you to do one thing. I want you to walk around this whole masjid 3 times with this small bowl of water. Make sure not one drop drips out of this bowl. This individual began this mission, and he walked around the masjid 3 times and did not drip a drop. He came back to the elder individual in the community, and he asked him, he said, did you do the mission? He said, yes. He said, so what happened? He said, I didn't drip anything. I didn't drop anything. And now I'm going to go. Salaam alaikum. He said, before you go, he said, I have a question. When you were walking around the masjid, did you see all of the things that you listed to me for the reasons that you were not going to come back? He said, no, I didn't see any of that. He said, now make sure the next time you go into a masjid to please make sure that this is the way that you connect with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Make sure that you're truly paying attention to Allah and don't worry about what people do to you. But that is not to give an excuse to anyone that's doing racism in the masjid. That's only to give strength to the people who come to the masjid and who have ever witnessed any racism. I'm going to cut it short because I've been told that my time is short. So I want to make sure that all of the other panel members are given a chance to speak. And I wanted to thank everyone for coming. And assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Thank you, Ustad Abdul Jabbar a lot. I used your words and I put it into a quick graphic, but because they were so profound, our faith brings us together, but our akhlaq keeps us together. Inshallah, next on is Sister Arisa Abdul Jabbar, and she identifies as a follower of Ahlul Bayt, a mother and sister, a friend that cultivates unity and sisterhood, and instilling our youth with positive outlook. Sister Arisa Abdul Jabbar, let's invite her with a loud salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Again, this is the Arisa, also known by IEC. And I just have a little insight of my commitment that I try to express to all on a daily is a commitment to inclusion, quality, as well as diversity, and being responsible of our actions and positive behaviors when we come around each other. And I just want to inspire each other. In this time, my heart is very heavy, so please excuse me. So in this past few days, it has been very hard and heavy in grief. And I have been in anguish of just feeling all of the senseless deaths that happen within our community, as well as outside with the many African-American men and women. For example, George Floyd, brother Yasin Muhammad, I don't know if anybody heard of him, but he is in Georgia, who was also a senseless kill. And Breonna Taylor, which happy birthdays to her because today is her birthday. And the list goes on. This has reopened many wounds for me. And of course, the wounds had never truly healed, but wounds that has been around hundreds of years in the making. So I would like to just share with you and to help us to move forward and to how we can make this easier upon each other to move forward. And it's not something that we're going to be able to get over overnight, but of course we can work and be courageous and compassionate to both ourselves and to with each other. I pray to Allah that my followers, fellow believers, and brothers and sisters, that we can try just a little harder in being just with each other and amongst one another, you know, moving to put an extra smile or extra, you know, pep in our step, Islamically anyway, when we're around each other, and just having a positive aspect. So I came up with a list of maybe tactics that I have tried when I have came into a room and maybe felt, you know, not the love that I was expressing to others. So when I'm in that conversation, or if I just give the salams to another, I try to listen to understand and lead with empathy. So if someone says, "Oh, how you doing?" You know, they may not really want to hear how you're doing, but of course, you know, you lead with empathy and you just smile, extra smile, and try to get eye contact, and being open to another part of you. When you're in a conversation, be clear that you're not debating. So if you have a disagreement and you have a different opinion, be open to hearing that and debating and being clear, not that you're not debating and you just want to have common ground. So just trying to understand one another, and also, as Ibrahim, my husband, has stated, you know, listen to and to understand, as well as assume a positive intent. Always think of the person in the most kindest way. Don't think of them, oh, they're coming off or they want something, or, they're coming at you in a negative aspect. And then, of course, be comfortable with being uncomfortable. So when you are in conversations, something like this platform, and you have a question, and it's okay to be uncomfortable with your questions, because we want to have a good understanding. So again, be comfortable with being uncomfortable. So inshallah, I'm just going to keep this short and sweet. I wanted to just share with all of you all, let's follow our Ahlul Bayt Islam and with their wonderful characteristics and behaviors, and how to treat another human being. So when we are together, or even if we're not together, send your salams to another sister or brother, or to sisters for me, of course, and, check on each other. Even though you may not have a close bond with the other person, but you do have each other's WhatsApp, or you see that you haven't seen someone in a while, pick up the phone or send them a text and check on each other. So inshallah, I just wanted to say also, surely believers are brothers and sisters of each other, Surah Al-Hujurat, verse 10, and greet your friends with a smile. Sumaya included that one. Greet your friends with a smile on your face, by Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And thank you again for listening. If you have any questions, inshallah, you're more than welcome to add a comment. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sister Arisa. I know this was no easy task, and I pushed you a little too much to do it, but inshallah, I truly feel like everyone's hearts are soft right now to receive the education, and I hope that is the case. I love when you said that, get uncomfortable. I guess maybe that's the first step in change. Again, just a reminder to everyone that we are currently conducting a poll on Slido.com, and you put IEC on there. And with that, you can also post your questions under the question answer session. So you could do both those things. Since we're having this going on Zoom and YouTube, so we can collect all the questions in one spot, that would be Slido.com. I will post it in the chat here too. Next up is Majeda Hage-Hassan. Majeda is a mother of 6, mashallah. Everyone say mashallah, please. And she is married to, this was the bio. She gave me half Jamaican and half, Arisa, remind me. Anyway, so she's currently living in Tampa community. She is here to share her perspective on racism in the Arab community. And since IEC is also heavily Arab, so inshallah she can share her experiences on that. If Majida, you are online, please unmute yourself.
Assalamu alaikum. Can everybody hear me? I'm sorry I'm not on camera. I'm sitting outside right now, so the lighting is not that great. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. I just wanted to, like, my part in this is that, like the sister was saying, kind of talking about the Arab racial bias in our Muslim community. Unfortunately, it's unfortunate that something like this has to bring us to the table to talk about this, because what we will hear from most people who are part of the Islamic community, whether they are Muslim or not, is that Islam does not teach racism. That is true, but just like it does not teach terrorism, and it does not teach discrimination, it does not teach sexism, it unfortunately is within our community. And it's really hard to see it, because we might not be outright sexist, or we might not be outright racist, but there's many different things that we do. They're called microaggressions in our attitudes that will portray that sexism, that racism out there. And I'm Lebanese, and the reason why I told the sister to let everybody know that I'm married to half Panamanian, half Jamaican black male is because it's not done often. And when I was preparing to get married to my husband, there was some pushback from certain members of the family. I was even told that, a husband can be purchased for me. And so, it's something that I've experienced on my part, but it couldn't have affected me as much as it affected my husband, who received the brunt of it. And raising multicultural and multiracial children. It's really important for us to understand that we've got to pave a way that is easier for them, especially in this day and age when just being a Muslim in general is just so hard. It sometimes feels like the whole world is against us. And as Shias especially, we have so many examples in front of us that there should be no shade thrown. There should be no microaggression thrown from any Shia towards anybody because they are different. Imam Ali alayhi salam has said that we're afraid of those things that we do not know, we don't understand, and so we start to behave ignorant. And so those people who are racist and ignorant, it's their fear of their ignorance that makes them act a certain way. And until we actually understand that there really is no difference between us and the other except by our piety, that's the only time that we can actually start to treat people equally. And so I just wanted to okay, so when I was growing up as an Arab person, an Arab speaking person, I always referred to somebody who was of darker skin, black, as an abid. I did not know, I never made the correlation between the word abid, meaning slave, and that word which I was calling another human being, till I actually got to college and was taking an Arabic course. And I went back home shocked. I told my mom, I was like, Mom, we've been using this word that is a slur to talk about a whole class of people. And she was surprised. And it just goes to show how insidious and how ingrained in our psyche, in our everyday life, in our everyday vernacular, that racism has become, and we don't even know we're being racist. And I can tell you right now, my parents are not racist. They married me off to a black man. So alhamdulillah, I knew that my mom wasn't saying it out of knowledge, and I myself was not saying it out of knowledge. But the fact that this word still exists today in our vernacular, in our Arabic vernacular, shows how much work the Arabic community has to do. And like I said, like the brother Ibrahim asked everybody, how many times have you been invited to a person of color's home? I want to say person of color because it's not just quote unquote, African Americans that we shun. It's also people from the islands, who don't necessarily identify as part of the African American culture, and so on and so forth. So how many times have we actually been to their homes or invited them to our homes? So we don't have to sit there and call the person a derogatory name. We don't have to necessarily be outright racist. But when we walk into the masjid, do we smile at our quote unquote Arab sisters, our Desi sisters, and then just say, a closed face, assalamu alaikum, to our black sister? When we go into the masjid, are we shaking every brother's hand with gusto and just like assalamu alaikum to the brother, to the black brother? So all these little things, when a sister walks into a group of women, we're sharing, Middle Eastern, generations old recipes. Do we get quiet because we think that she can't participate in this conversation? Are we wondering, when did she or he become a Muslim? That's a very big thing. We've got African Americans in America who have been Muslims for longer than, some Arabs have even known how to say their Shahada. Yet we always assume that they just became Muslim, or that they became Muslim because so and so told them. Are we always surprised when we hear, an African American brother or sister say the Surah Al-Fatiha in Arabic? Are we like, oh, mashallah, you've learned it? Like, these are all different symptoms of racism that we don't necessarily recognize because it's not outright, saying something mean to someone. And so these are the kind of things that we have to stop and see. Like, are we exhibiting racial biases in what we do? And if we do, we have to stop, because it's not just us and the person that we're being racially biased to that is being affected. It's everyone around us. It's that brother that looks at you as a pillar of the community. It's that, that daughter that looks at you to see how she should be behaving. All these people, it's the people who watch your comments on Facebook. It's the people who watch how you walk in, your body language around these black brothers and sisters. And I want to say too that, what the brother said about Bilal, I want to make this really quick mention and I'll be done. I was on Facebook when this, looking at all the comments, and on one of the Muslim groups, a brother or a sister, I'm not really sure who it was, came on and said, I am with the Black Lives Movement, Black Lives Matter movement, and I love my black brothers and sisters because Bilal, was a great Sahaba of the Prophet, and he was black. So of course I love my black brothers and sisters. And I actually asked him, I said, if there was no Sahaba of the Prophet that was black, would you love your black brothers and sisters? And we Shia love to mention brother, the Shaheed John, right, who was there with Imam Hussein on the sands of Karbala, who, who shed his blood for our Imam. But do we need to have someone there in order to recognize that these black brothers and sisters are human as well? They don't have to be Muslim. That's our problem, is that we only look at them in a fair light because they happen to be Muslim, when we should really be stepping back and remember Imam Ali's hadith that says people are of two kinds, your brothers in humanity and your brothers in Islam. And we have these tendencies to think ourselves superior, and as Arabs especially, we have this sense to think that, oh, Allah sent us the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He's of us, and so we are better. We only make up 17% of the Islamic world, to be honest. And Allah sent His mercy to us because we were the worst of the worst. So when we get on our high horse and try to say we know the proper Arabic, we know this, we know that, we forget that we're lucky Allah has sent us the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam because we were the worst of the worst. And for us to kind of try to treat other people, no matter who they are, just because they're not Arabs, in a certain way, it's kind of like ironic. It's kind of like the pot call, what did they say, the kettle calling the pot black? So I just wanted to kind of bring those ideas to light, that you might not be outright racist, but what do you do in your interactions with your black brothers and sisters, or your black neighbors who don't necessarily be Muslim? What do you do that they can pick up on that shows that you have racial bias? You don't have to be racist, but that small racial bias is enough to weaken your iman and weaken your bond with the fellow human beings. So that's it.
Thank you so much, Sister Majeda, for sharing all your insights with us. Since you brought up Hazrat John and microaggressions, it reminded me a couple of years ago, I got a children's book. It was on the Shuhada of Karbala. And Hazrat John's book literally begins with the statement, though he was dark-skinned, his face shone. And I remember reading it and being appalled that, like, why couldn't, like, there's a microaggression right there. That those are two, they're saying that as if they're two opposite statements. And, our children consume those books, and if they're not critical, they kind of start, internalizing those kind of sentiments. Anyway, thank you so much for that.
If I can just intercede, because you just reminded me. Thank you for pointing that out, because going back to Bilal, may Allah be pleased with him, we only recognized him after he stopped being a slave and became part of the Muslim Ummah. We put that onus on him, like, oh, subhanAllah, he was released from slavery. Abu Bakr got him out of slavery. Like, why do we have to mention the fact that he was a slave before? Why would, we call him Bilal the slave. We don't even refer to him as Bilal ibn, I forget what, it slips my mind what it is. And so that, like you said, is another microaggression. Oh yeah, we have a black person in our history, but he was a slave, just like you said, John was also a slave when he was on the sands of Karbala. And so already we have that in our mindset, that all black people are subservient to everybody else, which is not true.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Next up, we actually have Sheikh Mujtaba al-Khaliq. And since I see a lot of new names here, I will do a quick intro of him. He's the resident alim of IEC. He was born in a family of scholars, and so, he, from a very small age, young age, he started studying Islamic studies. He's gone to the Hawza of He has been in many, he has served many communities. He's been in Australia, Vancouver, Tampa Bay, and currently, alhamdulillah, he is serving the Orlando and Sanford communities. So with a loud salawat, let's welcome Sheikh Mujtaba. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وصلى الله على سيدنا ونبينا محمد وعلى آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المنتجبين. Dear mu'mineen and mu'minat, brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. It is an honor to be in a forum discussing the situation with our brothers in faith and equals in humanity, as Imam Ali alayhi salam says, whether they are our brothers in faith or equals in humanity, yet with different colors that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chose for us and them and for all humanity. In fact, one of the signs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Holy Quran, he says, وَمِنْ آيَاتِهِ, and ayat in the Holy Quran refer to the miracles of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In fact, amongst his miracles, amongst his signs, and miracles are signs in essence, amongst his signs is the differences in your colors and your tongues, your languages. This is how he decreed that we are created in different colors and different areas, different languages. This is part of his signs, part of his miracles. In fact, it is in itself, it is a proof of the Creator and of what science today calls the intelligent designer. He is a designer, and he designed and he fashioned in so many different ways, so many different humans, that every single one of us can be identified with our banan, as he says in the Holy Quran, with the fingerprints. بَلَا قَادِرِينَ عَلَىٰ أَن نُسَوِّيَ بَنَانَهُ. However, in that same surah and many other surahs of the Holy Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that insan by nature is in loss, as we recite in Surah Al-Asr. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, wal-Asr inna al-insana lafi khusr. In other surahs, other ayat, we have the same concept. بَلْ يُرِيدُ الْإِنسَانُ. After the banan, he says, بَلْ يُرِيدُ الْإِنسَانُ لِيَفْجُرَ أَمَامَهُ. His insan by nature destroys his future. But what do I mean by that? If one does not purify, if insan does not do tazkiyah and purifies himself from certain tendencies that are within him, within her, within us, then we will have certain characteristics that are, in fact, that may lead to our fights, our shedding of blood, mischief, and so on. And part of those, one of those very dominant characteristics is racism. That leads to wars, leads to issues, and leads to human beings being able to commit the worst of crimes to another human, yet be able to sleep at night. And what I mean, I'll explain what I mean by that. A human being, in the end of the day, has what we call in Arabic the lamir, or the conscience. And a human being, at the end of the day, has the whispering of the angels within him. We know that shayateen also whisper, but within him has the guidance from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And therefore, a human being knows very well that certain things are bad, that certain things are wrong, he should not be doing them. And when he does, he does not feel well within himself. So how can a human being live with the crime of killing another human being? How can a human being killing another innocent human being? How can a human being live with the crime of looting the property and abusing the rights of another human being? And we're speaking in today's world, especially with so much supposedly advanced civilizations and advancement in human rights and studies in terms of social rights, human rights, and so on. We've studied all these things. How can we still be doing those things? And the only way we can understand how it still works, or how it still happens and how it works, is that we start categorizing and we start making others or other categories of human beings less at a lesser level of a human being than us. And that's when people are able to go in certain countries, for instance, certain organizations, they allowed for their marketing strategies to cause death to millions of children in Africa, simply by looking at these people as lower, unfortunately, as lower class of human beings. That's how they look at them. If they look at them as humans, well, in fact, in some cases, to that degree, we have ignorance. In fact, I was watching a documentary recently made by some journalists here, and they were interviewing a politician or somebody who is trying to get into politics and so on. And one of those white supremacists who was openly saying that they are different. You know, basically these people are of a different color. He was proud to be, according to him, to be white. And he was saying, yes, we have the right. It's like a God-given right we in terms of being of a better class of human being. Or even maybe he considers himself to be the human being and the rest are not. Well, ayadu billah, that exists when human beings do not purify. And therefore, they consider themselves to be the ones of a higher caliber, and they have the rights, and the rest do not. And this has existed throughout the history of mankind. A lot of it, some of it had to do with social classes, some of it had to do with other categorization. However, a lot of it had to do with the most obvious thing, which is the look. And believe it or not, Alhamdulillah, I was born to a family of basically mixed cultures and mixed races, in a sense, Arab and Persian. And I witnessed how people can be racist, how certain people, even within the Arabs, for example, neighboring countries, Lebanon versus Syria, and they one considers the other as a lower class of human and citizen, Iranian versus Afghani, and so many others. And in Africa, you look at, I think it was Rwanda, that the documentary I watched, that the journalist was asking one of the tribe members that they were in the civil war, how do you identify the others when you attack them? He said, by the look. He said, how do you look identical? He says, no, if you look at the way their nose is and the way our nose is and the way, basically, to some, they may look identical. Like for me, if I look at South Korean versus North Korean, I probably think they look identical, but maybe maybe themselves, they look at each other and they can identify, one another by the looks. Unfortunately, mankind, when we do not purify, we come to this level where, and I've mentioned this before, if when it comes to an outsider, and imagine from other animals, okay, perspective, if a bird looks at us, if a dog looks at us, would that bird or dog, would they think that one is better than the other because this guy is a different color? And this is what I want us to pay attention. If shaitan, and when shaitan looks at us, when the devil, when Satan looks at us, does he discriminate in the way he wants to deceive us and to lead us to the hellfire? Does he think that one is better than the other? In reality, none of that exists. These differences are the decree of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, part of the way he created us, part of the way he in fact shows his greatness and his ability in his creation, that he can create from the same thing, same soil. You have two different trees growing. One gives this fruit, the other gives this fruit. One looks in this and from the same parents descending from Adam ala nabina wa alayhi salam, he can create humans in so many different looks and colors, and every one of them is different in their fingerprints. Now coming to basically a summary and what is our obligation. Now obviously we need to purify as human beings. We do need to purify, and ascend above these categories. And if we allow them to continue, there could be a Hitler within me, there could be a Fir'aun within me, and if I get tested with a position, I might display those things unless I purify. This is why it is important, and some of you alluded to it, that we shouldn't wait for incidents as the one that happened and this inhumane treatment of a human being on the basis of his color. We should not wait for that to happen before we get together and discuss those things. Nonetheless, better late than never, as they say. It's important that we are discussing this. It's important that we shed light on the fact that as human beings, we do need to ascend above. Now, practically, some practical solutions. I want to come into some practical solutions in terms of how do we deal with this. Before I get to that, I just wanted to highlight a couple of things on what was discussed earlier. One of the comments that was made was about the color of some prophets or the imams of Ahlul Bayt and the depiction. Now, we know that the pictures that are depicted of the imams of Ahlul Bayt are just imaginary. None of them are confirmed, none of them are correct, and we are not advised in general to have those pictures to start with. It is best not to have them. It is best to understand the imams as their characters, as their qualities, their great qualities. This is what we need to basically identify them with, the names and the qualities that they had, from Amir al-Mu'mineen to Imam Hassan al-Mujtaba alayhi salam, to Imam Hussein alayhi salam and his qualities. And then the rest of the imams, you see, they were given certain titles so that we can identify them with those great titles and learn from these titles and these qualities. It shouldn't be about their looks, and it really does not matter whether it's true or not. Some narrations are there in terms of some of their mothers being from Africa. Was it from the northern part of Africa? Because this is still a debate, and therefore just so that it does not matter in actual fact what color, but just so that we get the facts right. It's a debate whether, for instance, some of the imams, what color they were and what color their mother was, because as you know, Africa, we have from the basically Moroccan, because the mothers of two of our imams were from Moroccan part. One of them was the Egyptian, who was a Coptic, who may have been of dark skin. We don't have confirmation, and if so, the imam would have been dark skin, and that's Imam Jawad alayhi salam, in fact, that has been described to have a little bit of a dark skin. Nonetheless, none of this should matter in actual fact. The color of the skin of the imams or the prophets should not matter. It is not something that we should even need to discuss and bring up. Yes, what does matter is that we should clarify that this is not an issue to discuss. Whether Jesus, peace be upon him, was black with, or darker with brown eyes, was he blonde with blue eyes? None of these things should matter. Maybe he was depicted in a certain way because the people of that culture preferred that look, because they identified themselves as that look. In any case, what really matters is the way Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the Ahlul Bayt immediately, and this is what I want to say in a practical sense, and coming from a family that we've had this basically the mixed part within us, this is very important for us to reflect on. When Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam announced Islam and he established his government, the first government in Medina, he had people of all walks of life with him, including the Bilal, who was, yes, he was a slave at some point. He was then, was he purchased by Abu Bakr? This is a Sunni narration, just to clarify. Was Abu Bakr a rich man? We do not have historical confirmation of that. In fact, if anybody was rich, was Khadija salamullah alayha, and the Prophet sent people to purchase him, most probably would have been with the money of Khadija. In any case, Sheikh Yudhkar, just to clarify some of the facts that we take from other schools, let's take them with a grain of salt. In any case, coming back to how the Prophet dealt with it, immediately, it did not take time. Immediately, he established a theme where color did not matter, race did not matter. Immediately. It was not something that it had to take time, it had to take generations. Immediately he broke that barrier, to the point that it wasn't just that he accepted Bilal as, as him being on the same level of faith as others. No, he appointed him. Bilal had a good voice. He appointed him as the state spokesman. In fact, when we say mu'adhin is the announcer. He would make the announcements. He would not just call the adhan for prayers. Anytime he wanted to gather people, he would send Bilal. Anytime he wanted to make announcement, he would send Bilal. The racist amongst the Arabs, some of them amongst the Sahaba, so-called Sahaba, or the so-called pure Sahaba, nothing makes them pure. In fact, one of them constantly debated with the Prophet ﷺ about the non-Arabs coming to Hajj and how could they marry. In fact, Mut'atul Hajj he made it haram, and Mut'ah, he made it haram because of this. He says, how can we allow those non-Arabs to come and have marriages with because they come in Hajj, and if they have that period of time where they're not in Ihram, they could get married, and how could we allow that? And therefore he was against it, and the Prophet told him that you will never believe in it. And you know what the situation is with somebody who accepts some parts of the book and does not accept some parts. He was one of those racists, and others. They came to the Prophet and said, Ya Rasulullah, this man cannot even pronounce his sheen properly. When he would say the adhan, he says ashadu. He cannot say ashhadu, he would say ashhadu. The Prophet ﷺ, he said, Seenu Bilalin sheenun indallah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala hears his sheen, his seen as sheen. He knows what it is, and that's what matters. Therefore, he dismissed their claim that he should change his the announcer and the mu'adhin. And this is how Ahlul Bayt were. In general, immediately they changed the situation. Immediately they treated these people. That's why in the description we are told the Imams of Ahlul Bayt would sit down with their servants and their slaves. Yes, they were still living in a society of slavery, and they would still purchase those slaves in order to educate them, teach them how to lead a better life, and then they would send them out to be teachers, including Imam Ali alayhi salam, with the famous situation with Maytham al-Tammar, for example, and others whom the Imams would bring them and teach them, educate them, and then they would give them some sort of a gift that they can establish a life with, and so on. This was how they led their lives. This was how they immediately changed the situation. So as Muslims, especially living in the West, especially living in a country or countries that are, we see a lot of different races living in the same city, in the same vicinity, different to many other countries that we may have lived in, where there was a majority of one race, and then a few very few, in fact, to the point that in some of those countries that some of us may have grown in, they would not have seen other races, whether it be Chinese race or African race or something, or any. They would not. It wasn't something that was common that they would see. Here we're living amongst each other. This is the perfect opportunity for us to break those barriers, for us to live the life of Ahlul Bayt. We say in the dua or in ziyarah of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, ziyarat Ashura, Allahumma ja'al mahyaya mahya Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad wa mamati mamata Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. Make me live, Ya Allah, make me live like the Prophet and his progeny. It means that we live like them in every aspect. One of the aspects of their lives is that they did not look at anyone with any race or color and consider them as being lower or higher. None of that mattered. They evaluated, in fact, they evaluated people on the purification and the heart, regardless of even the religion. And this is something I want us to pay attention to. Not so long ago, we had a discussion with some of our brothers who are reverts. And some of them shared their experiences and how they feel not so welcome in our gatherings. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and Ahlul Bayt, the Imams of Ahlul Bayt, their treatment of people was not even based on their religion that they came from. It was about whether they accept the truth and how firm they stand on truth and how they practice. That's what mattered. And that was the basis of their classification. Therefore, out of a sudden, Salman becomes one of the closest companions of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, to the point that he calls him one of the Ahlul Bayt. He says, Salmanu minna Ahlul Bayt. In other words, don't worry about whether he is from Persia or this guy from Roman Empire or wherever they came from. We have amongst the companions of the Imams some who came from the Roman Empire. We have some, in fact, the wives who came from the Roman Empire, the mother of our present Imam, Ajalullah Ta'ala Farajahu Sharif. Therefore, there is, in Islam, we have a perfect example to live a life like the Prophet and Ahlul Bayt, where color did not matter, race did not matter. The only thing that mattered is the heart and the purification of the heart and taqwa, and that is the basis of brotherhood for us. How do we do that? Immediately in our gatherings, we live a life of basically Muslims and lovers of Ahlul Bayt. Not and it is difficult. It is a challenge, because as we go to our centers, as we get together, often it happens that we tend to mingle with the Iranian mingles with the Iranian, the Iraqi mingles with the Iraqi, and the rest. The same thing, perhaps Pakistani with the Pakistani. They're more comfortable speaking their own language and so on, and nothing. We cannot blame them for that. But we need to make a conscious effort to make others also feel welcome. And I mentioned this so that, inshallah, whoever is in the minority within our centers, if they don't get sensitive, and they forgive our shortcomings, whoever it is coming from, whether it's from myself or anybody else, they forgive us for our shortcoming. And inshallah, it is not intended in any ill manner. Inshallah, it is simply just the comfort in the language and the culture. Nonetheless, we need to all of us make a conscious effort to decide our closeness and our brotherhood based on our faith and based on the practice of faith. And the question whether or not we invited each other or we visited each other, I would humbly say that I'm more than happy to have, and I have had one of our brothers. It was in fact a regular iftar we had together on Thursday, who was of a different color. Alhamdulillah, that was not an issue for me, and inshallah it's not an issue for any of our brothers and sisters. I seek your forgiveness for speaking for so long. I don't know what else is in the program. But if there are any questions or any comments, I'm happy to hear them.
Thank you so much, Sheikh. We do have questions coming in on Slido. I just wanted to wrap up this poll, and then we have 2 more questions on this poll, but we'll jump to our Q&A that people have sent in. As you can all see, that this poll's results say that many times people have witnessed racial bias in the Muslim community, which is sad, and inshallah we can work on it. So the first question is, and if I can invite all the panelists to maybe turn on their cameras so we can see them and they can decide who wants to answer them. The first question is, many Muslims support Palestinians throwing rocks but are opposed to the protests going on currently. Do you find that to be a double standard? And whoever wants to go ahead, and I see Majeda has raised her hand. If you want to speak to that, Majeda.
I think one of the worst ways of trying to kill a movement is to I'm not telling this about the person who posted the question, but it's a very good question because a lot of Palestinians do support the rock throwing, but then they don't support peaceful protests or anything. And it's a whataboutery type of concept. And it's like, it doesn't matter what you need to do. I'm right doing what I have to do. Leave me alone because my circumstance is different. You know, I'm suffering more than you. And just like they say, there's no sin that's greater than another sin. You know, Einstein became popular because he stated the obvious, right? The theory of relativity. What I feel is important isn't always important to you because, you know, relativity for us is different. And so you cannot judge a person when they're desperate. The Palestinians are desperate in throwing stones. The African American community here, the people of color in America, they're beyond desperate. Our Palestinian brothers and sisters have been suffering for decades, but our African American brothers and sisters have been suffering for generations. You know, our Palestinian brothers and sisters, they've had their land stolen. Our African American brothers and sisters have been stolen from their land. So we can sit here for days and do the comparisons, and those people who don't see the similarities or want to pick apart, like, oh, as African Americans, you shouldn't do this, you have it better than Palestinians right now. You don't know what that African American person is going under because we don't know how each and every single person handles certain types of stress. And so it is in a type, a double standard when we say, yes, the Palestinians can throw rocks and can, you know, some people even say that, you know, they're justified in even more extreme measures, but then we turn around and say, oh, you know, you shouldn't be marching out on the street. What else do you want? You get to live in America. You're free. Or you're not walking in that person's shoes. You know, you don't know what they're feeling and what's going on with them. And so to even bring it to to even, you know, to not see oppression wherever it is, regardless of all the other oppressions, is to be a zalim in my eyes. It's part of being, you know, kind of like, you know, you hanging out with the Tawhid, because each oppression is almost a vacuum in itself, you know. So it's like that, you know, when they try to use that example of the burning house, each house is important in itself. However, we gotta realize where all the problems are and address them. So yes, you know, with Palestinians are throwing rocks and they're justified. Well, so are our African American brothers and sisters, and those who don't speak up for our brothers, African American brothers and sisters, but will speak up for our Palestinians, they're being hypocrites. You can't champion one cause and not champion the other one, because like Nelson Mandela said it, you know, he spoke up for the Palestinians and said, without the liberation of Palestine, none of us are free. Or without the liberation and the freedom and the comfort of our African American brothers and sisters, be they Muslim or not, no one is also comfortable or free. You know, they'll come for us. You know, if we're gonna do the whole, well, that's them and this is us, well, they're gonna come for us once they're finished with them. You know, and so, you know, we Shia, we're taught by Imam Hussein. His whole example is that we stand up for it, no matter who it is, no matter where it is.
Thank you, Majeda. Sorry, we're kind of running out of time. The next one is more of a statement. It seems Muslims need to understand that the Imam of our time is a person of color based on his ethnicity. If you claim to truly love our Imam, you cannot have racist views. We only ever give the example of Hazrat Bilal as proof that Muslims are not racist. Do you consider that tokenism? Yes, brother Jabbar, please go ahead.
Alhamdulillah. Yes, that was something that I was speaking on earlier, and I think that maybe, and let me clarify so we won't get misunderstood. You know, when you speak about other places, and you know, we say to ourselves that it should not matter, but when we go to other places and we see that it does matter, and we see that people are operating in stratifications. That's a word that I would like everyone to look up: stratification, human stratifications. And we operate in these type of manners, then it does matter, because a person sees certain things, sees certain images. And as our beloved Sheikh Mujtaba, assalamu alaikum rahmatullah, Sheikhna, as he has said, about our beloved Nabi Allah Isa alayhi salam, so it's not just the imams, then it becomes the prophets, and then it becomes a complete whitewash. When you look into Islamic history, all of our books, all of the books, the coloring books for the children, it becomes a mechanism of programming. Once people are programmed, then you have people that are in the masjid, as he had said, that have never really seen a Black person in another region. And it's like, wow, why did the people who produced the book only put out the images of them in white skin? So now when you see a person, now he's further alienated, like, oh my God, I don't even know if you're a human. And this is the way that they treated us and my ancestors in the previous generations. So we do have to make sure that we understand that when you do talk about Bilal, and if you say, oh, he's a servant, or he was a slave, why can't we just say that Bilal was a companion? Why can't we just say that the people that was around the Imams, John bin Huway, why wasn't he just a companion of them? Why does his occupation have to come up? Because we say that the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam treated their servants in a way that it was more like an employment. But then when it comes up, he was a slave. We have to get out of this mentality. And I think that more emphasis and more research and tahqiq needs to be done about this and the way that it affects other people, the words that we use that offend others. And I would like to just say that, alhamdulillah.
Thank you so much. Can we accurately say that racism was actually the first major sin, since Satan essentially committed racism against human beings in saying, I am better than him?
Sheikh Mujtaba, I seen him do a very good answer one day about that, and it was a deeper implication about the riwayah and why Satan did not bow down, and he did not bow down to the ruh more. But Sheikh, you can answer that if you would like.
No, it's a good way of looking at it, and we do have reference to that. That when he looked at his what he was created from, in other words, when he looked at the matter, he did not look beyond the matter. He looks at the matter and he says, I am better. When in actual fact, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not make a mistake in choosing one to be his Khalifa, his vicegerent on earth. Wal-'ayadu billah, he is the most wise. We cannot even think that he could make an error in his decision. So God did not look at the matter. God looked at the ruh, and that's why when he says to the malaika, فَإِذَا سَوَّيْتُهُ وَنَفَخْتُ فِيهِ مِنْ رُوحِي فَقَعُوا لَهُ سَاجِدِينَ. When I perfect him and then put this ruh in him, the ruh that he says belongs to me, then you prostrate to him. That is the honor, the ruh. And I have said it before that ruh does not have a gender, ruh does not have a color, ruh does not have a race. None of these things can be attributed to the ruh. All of these things are attributed to the body, including the language that we speak is attributed to the body. So it's a good way of looking at it, yes.
Sheikh, is it acceptable and lawful for a Muslim community to prevent full membership to brothers and sisters of different races or cultures?
Very good.
Should we discuss this in another round?
Yeah, no, I mean, it is definitely when you identify yourself as an Islamic center, then you should not. I mean, if you add to it an Islamic center, Shia Islamic Center, for example, so you can say that the members have to be Shia Ithna Ashari, or you could set a rule where members who become in charge have to be Shia Ithna Ashari. But if you add race to membership or to people of position, there, then you are no longer operating under an Islamic umbrella or even a Shia umbrella. You have to then specify that this is a cultural center more so.
For the African American guests, what can Muslim organizations do to make our mosque centers more welcoming for people of different races and cultures?
Really quickly, if anyone else doesn't want to answer, we need to do more of this, inshallah. We need to increase the dialogue. Let's not wait until George Floyd. Let's not wait to Sandra Bland. Let's not wait to Alton Sterling. And a lot of these things that all of these individuals that I just mentioned, you know, outside of Sandra Bland, were all murdered right in front of our face. Let's not wait until it shows up at our door. Let's attack it on a level that our faith and our titles and our what we strive to be as far as followers of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam and the followers of the Ma'asumeen, that, you know, we make sure that we have the best of akhlaq. Our faith and our titles bring us together, but our akhlaq keeps us together. And I would just like to say that I've, you know, been honored to enjoy delicious meals with my dear Sheikh here, Sheikh Mujtaba, inshallah, alhamdulillah, at his home. So when I did make that comment about how many of you or how many of us invite people into their home outside of the masjid, if I was able to say that point, you know, remember that there are many of us that are very different, and those who are different, allow them to lead the way, because that is the way, inshallah. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen.
Last question, and please stay on because there's 2 more questions on the poll that I would love if everyone can answer. If Muslims are racist with each other, lighter Pakistanis against darker Pakistanis, can we ever expect for Muslims to stand up for African Americans?
Yeah.
I like the inshallah because the power of prayers. Never underestimate. Today in my Jum'ah sermon, I mentioned that we underestimate the power of prayers. Recite dua of Imam al-Hujjah, dua Allahumma rzuqna tawfiq at-ta'a. In there are good lessons for us how to be with one another, and many other du'as. Let us pray for the Muslim ummah in general, that they mature. Let us pray desperately, ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help us, all of us, mature to oversee those trivial material differences and look at each other as believers, as the purified ones, as the heart is, inshallah.
Thank you so much. The last 2 questions of the poll, if you can jump on it on Slido, under polls. It says, did you learn something new that would help you act differently next time? And if you can respond to that, inshallah, I can type. Let me jump on the last question. The last question is, what next steps are you going to try? You can choose more than one option. Will you be listening more this week, learning more about this issue, reach out and make new connections, have more conversations in my community and family, and call out casual racism? Again, if you haven't joined us on slido.com, please do so and enter IEC. Thank
I
you
apologize,
so much.
I have to seek your permission as it is time for Salah.
Yes, thank you so much. I will wrap this up. You can continue responding, inshallah. Thank you, everyone. There's lots of resources out there to learn more about this topic. And I really thank all the panelists for coming on and giving us time. Thank you so much. And for their help, please recite salawat.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad.
صل على محمد وآل محمد